Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday and the 16th of June. You're here at Lunch and Learn, and today we're going to be wrapping up with the last of the sessions, for the time being at least, on NewMind software with Aaron. Richard will be back this coming Monday. Next week is book solid with QEEG reviews. And so today we're going to have Aaron continue with the home training that he started on. We got a lot of sidetracks going during their session on Wednesday with great questions and comments. So he's going to continue with home training, and then we'll probably open up for any sort of general questions you may have about anything to do with the software. So Aaron, without any further delay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rob. So as always, with our Lunch and Learns, I'd like to give everybody a chance to ask any questions before we just get into a talk. So feel free, if unmute yourself. Everyone should be unmuted now. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask those. Okay. Well, if you do, feel free to jump in at any point. So yeah, the last session, we spent the first half of it with some really great questions. And we just kind of got into the whole idea of setting up home trainers, and things to think about. So I do want to kind of re-bring this up, and I will put the link into the chat panel. This is for our knowledge base on home training. So for those of you that didn't know that we had the knowledge base, I've got a couple videos just to let everyone know. I'm going to post those on the listserv. That'll be the final two here, the one from Wednesday and today. And I will put this post or this URL in the post. And what I recommend to clinics, when I'm training somebody on home training, as the question comes up is, well, how do I get them going on this? And one thing is sending them an email and include this information. So they're going to get the download link for the home training software, which is a free download for all your clients. There is this how-to video that kind of walks them through. I will let you know that I need to redo some of the beginning video because it is our older version of the home training amp. Some of you might still have one of those where the leads plug into the top instead of the front. So we will be cleaning that video up here at some point. But all the rest of the information is completely relevant as far as how to hook the leads up, utilizing the software. And then the really nice thing is there's this checklist for your clients. So this checklist is there for them. So it's going to let them know everything from what to do before their session, all the way through attaching equipment, things to think of during their session, like, to sit up straight, stay relaxed, don't cross arms and legs. Also some troubleshooting ideas. So if they're having any issues or they keep seeing an artifact come up, things to remind them, to stay relaxed and to breathe right. Make sure the electrodes are plugged in. Just little things that get overlooked. And then what to do after their session. Cleaning everything up, disconnecting everything. So that's there for you guys. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've provided that information for you. So that's kind of like the starting point of getting somebody set up for home training is, get them this information. I would also recommend, if they can get into your clinic, spend a little time and show them how to properly attach leads. Especially if it's like a parent with their child's going to be home training, have the parent and the child come into the office, and then you can actually guide the parent on how to place the leads, show them, the right way to do it, set them up for success in the beginning. Now, as far as getting them a training protocol set up. I've already got one here set as an active home plan. So creating a training plan for a home trainer, the initial steps are the same. We're gonna go in and create a new training plan. And for those of you maybe who weren't here, we talked about this a little on Wednesday. So we're going to be doing just the neurofeedback option here. The coherence, 4-channel coherence, of course, is not available for home training because our home training amp is a 2-channel amplifier. Also, we cannot do any type of coherence training. So if you're working like Seaburn Fisher's techniques, that has to be done in office because we do have to be able to unlink the ears in the software. There are 2-channel home training amp doesn't have that ability. So we're pretty much left with standard 1 and 2-channel protocols. But you can also, any one of the 1-channel protocols, you can use as home training. So you can do alpha theta for home training. You can do the proportional tones alpha down. You can do the peak alpha, SMR. So anything out of this list, as well as any custom protocol you want to create. And of course, in the 2-channel home training, we have the ability to create a custom protocol if we want to do that, or we can choose any of the 24 recommended protocols that comes from a map. You're just going to set up your iState like you always would, set up your session length. And then once all that's done is you're going to click save. So once you've created that training plan like you always would, to get that set up for home training, it's pretty easy. We're just going to come in and view the plan details. We are going to click on the home training option. When you first come in here, it's going to look like this. So it's deactivated as a home training, so we'll just activate that as a home training plan. You're going to go ahead and choose your feedback options. So just so everyone's aware, by default, they're all turned off. You're going to select one when it highlights in blue. That means that's an option for the client. I'm going to go ahead and just activate them all so you can see what that would look like for your client. It's not what I would recommend. I always would recommend to clinics that you pigeonhole the client just into whatever you feel is the best. So if they're doing a video, we're going to just do screen fading. If they're doing some sort of audio, whether that's an ebook or some nice music, then it'd be audio fading. You do have the option of screen and audio fading. Not a huge fan of that myself with clients, just because I've heard so many comments throughout the years when I worked in a clinic, how irritating it was trying to watch a video where the screen was fading, but also they would lose the audio, so they would kind of lose the dialogue. So I'm just a big fan of just screen fading for videos. And then you do have the option for tones. And as I mentioned on the last session, Rob had put a request in a little while ago to have a 5th option that was audio fading and tones. So that is on the to-do list for our developers. So as they pick through that list of work they have to do, eventually they're going to get around to that. So that's kind of up and coming at some point. We did talk a little bit about auto artifacting. I'll just kind of reiterate that is by default, it's always going to be set to a moderate at 75%. So kind of on a troubleshooting side of home training is, and this happens quite a bit for those of you that do home training, you'll know these phone calls of you get a new home trainer set up, and then they call you kind of frustrated saying, I've tried 3 times to do this session, and every time it gets to around 3 minutes and it just puts me back to the initial connecting screen. What's going on? Is there something wrong with the software? And the answer to that question is no. The software is doing exactly what it was designed to do. What's happening in a situation like that, if you do get that call, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time, it's the fact that the client isn't relaxed enough. It's generally the case, especially if you're starting them off at like FP1, FP2, they're carrying tension in their forehead. And the way our home training software is designed is basically to kind of protect your client. We've built in this feature that during the first, it's technically 2 minutes and 38 seconds, the software is monitoring the difference between artifact and clean EEG signal. And if during that first 3 minutes or 2 minutes and 38 seconds technically, if the software determines there's more artifact than clean signal, it will not allow that session to continue. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one, as a clinic, we are buying credits for our clients. So it preserves that, as well as we, as a company, want to make sure that these home trainers are getting good quality sessions. And that's one way that we're doing it, is making sure that they don't end up running, a session at home that is just artifact laden or sensors weren't connected properly to the scalp. We just want to make sure that they get the best session they can, and that's how we're going to do it. Now, most of your clients, especially if they're adults, a moderate artifacting level of 75% is fine to leave there. When I would change this is if I had a home trainer that, again, called with that same statement that they've tried multiple times. If I was a technician working, with that client, what I would probably do is get linked up with them with something like TeamViewer or Zoom, and I would turn on their camera on the computer and say, okay, let me see kind of where your sensors are. Show me the amplifier, make sure everything's kind of connected correctly first, and then go from there. Talk them through some things, hey, so is your tongue pressed against the roof of your mouth? Are you holding any tension in your forehead or your jaw? Are you nice and relaxed? Are your feet flat on the floor? Your hands, just flat on your lap? Kind of walk them through. You could start it up, look at the signals, explain to them what you're seeing. Now, there are those cases where no matter what we do as far as guiding the client to stay relaxed enough, especially if this is a kiddo that's hooked up to the equipment. Kids we know like to move around, they're little wiggle warts. So if all else fails, what you can do is instruct the client to just close the home training software. You would come into this page by clicking View Plan Details, clicking on the home training. And then I would turn down the auto artifacting to 50% first. I'm going to save that. Once it's saved, I'm going to instruct the client to reopen the home training software, log back in, and try it again. If we still can't get past that 3-minute mark, we're going to repeat that, have them close their home training software. We're going to drop it to 25%. We're going to save that again. Once we know it's saved, again, instruct the client to reopen the software, log back in, and attempt it again. Now, preferably, 25% is the lowest I would choose to go and still feel comfortable. I really would prefer not to turn it completely off. Now, that doesn't mean if you do have to turn it off that your client's not going to train. I worked for a company for 10 years and trained in an office for 2 years using BioExplore. Does not have auto artifacting built in. Clients still had successful trainings, even with the artifact there. It made my job a lot harder because artifacts showed up in trend lines, artifacts showed up in average amplitude at the end of the session. So it wasn't as easy from a technician or clinician standpoint looking at change in brain activity simply off, like the ending screens. But the client's still trained, had a lot of success. So if all else fails, you can turn the auto artifacting completely off. Your client is going to get some training in and around the artifact, but just understand the data you're going to see on your side to track progress is going to be skewed. So you're going to probably have more delta or theta present than what truly was there, because that artifact is going to get averaged into all the average amplitude numbers. It's potentially going to skew asymmetry. If they're tensing up, you get a lot of excessive high beta that's pulling that mid beta up. Your beta asymmetry numbers are probably going to be off. So you're really going to have to rely heavily on looking at their progress trackers to determine, if they're moving in the right direction. Put that back where it was. Now, the session results, this is going to be really kind of clinic to clinic preference. As I mentioned last time, and I'm just going to go through all of this so we've got it all in one video, is if you allow, or if you turn these session results on, what your client's going to see at their end of their session is this upper part of the performance screen. So it's going to be the point scale. 0 to 100, of course, the more points they get, the better their session was. We've got the dotted line here indicating the average of their previous session. And if the client did better than the previous section, they're going to get a little gold star, kind of like we did with kids in elementary school. Hey, you did really good here and here and here. Good job. Now, for some of your clients, and you can probably already start thinking of some of these that it would potentially be beneficial for them. It's going to be motivation. But on the other side of that, there can be some drawbacks. And the drawback is if your client has been averaging, let's say, 40 to 60 points per session, they've been getting gold stars on a regular basis, and then all of a sudden, one day they hook themselves up and train, and they end up with 10 points or less. Now you can probably start thinking of some of your clients that would automatically pick up the phone and call you in a panic or text you and say, oh my God, I think my brain's broken or something's wrong. 9 times out of 10, nothing's actually wrong. The equipment's fine, the software's fine, your client's brain isn't broken. Generally, what's the culprit was they probably had maybe a bad night's sleep the night before. They stayed up too late. There was noise in the neighborhood that kept startling them and waking them up. Whatever happened, maybe they slipped on their diet and they gluten bombed themselves or ate something that's a very sensitive food for them. So now they've got excessive inflammation. All of that's going to factor in because if they had a bad night's sleep, it's really going to mess around with especially compression and layering. And it's these three components that kind of factor into this point scale. So if their layering is low, which layering should be as high as possible. So if their layering's way down because their delta is so high from a lack of sleep or an inflammatory process, that's also gonna mess with the compression. So instead of all of these trend lines being closer together, if you get a surge in delta for whatever reason, that's going to mess with compression, and then potentially convergence is going to be way off. Like here we see this alpha convergence is not even close. Delta's great, theta's good, beta's fairly well, so it's high beta. So if convergence is off, compression is off, and layering is off, that is going to leave a very low points for that day. So we can reassure the client, talk it through with them. So tell me, just ask them some basic questions. How'd you sleep last night? Did you anything change in your schedule, you know, something different, you know, to get a new puppy, you have a new baby in the house, you know, little things like that, you know, it's not the norm. So keep that in mind. So as a clinician, you get the option of whether or not they see that point scale. So if you feel you have a client that's, you know, heavily anxiety, you might want to just not turn that on, and instead, you know, you can even have a technician check in with them once a week and just give them a little update. Hey, I've been looking at your sessions, everything looks fine. You're doing good. Progress trackers are looking great. You know, keep up the good work. You know, whatever you want to say to them. That would be the choice I would follow. Is more just me communicating with them instead of them trying to guess what's going on by seeing the session results. Personal preference. You and your clinic, you'll have to make that decision for yourself. And I do always recommend the progress trackers. I choose to have it set up for every single session. That way it's just habit. I also don't ever go crazy on the amount of symptoms I'm tracking. I'm tracking primary symptoms. At the most, 10 is kind of my limit on what I'll pick. I try to keep it, you know, small list. I don't want them to feel like they're sitting there for 10 minutes filling out a survey every single session. So I'm just looking at primary things. And for those of you that aren't aware, you can have multiple progress trackers set up for home trainers. So here you can see I've got, in this particular case, I've got one for the client, one for the parent. Now, if you set this up this way, now you can just say, you know, I'm just going to have the client do one, and that's it. You know, you can set it up to have both of them show up, and we'll see this in a minute, where, you know, if you wanted to get the thoughts of the parent and what they're seeing in their child, and then you also want to hear from, you know, the client training, you can set them both up and just instruct the client that, you know, you guys are going to alternate. So if they're training, you know, 3-4 days a week, you know, every other session, you know, the parents are going to do it, and same with the client. And then you can see what both of them are saying. And the nice thing is every time they fill that out, there's a notes section that we'll see, and they can tell you whatever they want to tell you. And those will be saved when you go into the progress tracking tab and click on the progress trackers. You can see whatever in the notes section, what the parents maybe said that they're seeing with the child. You can also see what the child is saying. Now, if the kid's 8 years old or so, 8, 9, probably just going to have the parent fill out a progress tracker. You know, if they're 12, 13 and older, you know, by that age, they're more than capable, you know, of expressing, you know, themselves, you know, so you just, you know, and not saying there isn't some younger kids, because there are some very intelligent younger children nowadays, you know, so if you feel they're capable of filling one out on their own, by all means, you know, again, that's decisions you'll have to make in your clinic. So once you get all this set up and you save it, you will go in and buy credits. You know, you can do that either unlimited weekly or per session. We're not going to go into all that on this session. But at that point, your client is ready to train. So now the client is at home. We've provided them, you know, the links that we saw here, so they can download their software, they can watch the how-to video, they've got the checklist. We're kind of setting them up for success. Again, we've made sure they have a Windows-based PC in their home, preferably Windows 10 or 11. Windows 11 is fine. We've tested all of our software with it, so no issues there. If you have a client who does not own a Windows-based PC. I have some clinics that have purchased a couple inexpensive computers, and for those people, they will just basically rent them a computer to use for their home training, or just include that with the equipment as part of the package. If your client does not have a Windows-based computer at home, they're just a Mac family, make sure they understand that it has to be a regular Windows operating system. I've gotten quite a few calls from clinics that they tell me, yeah, my client went out and got a computer to do home training, and they can't load the software up on the computer. And what's happening in that case is they probably, to save money, went and purchased a Chromebook, because you can get those for about $250. Chromebooks will not work, so make sure they understand they're going to have to spend, and you can get a decent computer now for home training, for about $400. You don't need a lot of excessive power to be able to run our home training software. It's pretty kind of simplified. So just make sure they've got something decent. And my recommendations, new computer, Windows 11, I like to make sure it's got an i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and they're good to go. Anything in that, they'll be able to run our home training. I've got some old computers from years and years ago that I've been able to successfully run our home training software on without any issues or glitches.
Hey, Aaron, another idea for those people who want to rent computers to their clients. I worked with a clinic a few years ago, and what they did is they had an IT person like you come in and set up the computers they were going to lease to the patients. And they set it up where the person cannot do anything but go into just the new mind training software. They couldn't get on the internet and all that, so they couldn't start doing emails and everything else. It purely just ran the training software, and that was it. So I think with a talented enough IT person, they could get around worrying about people downloading personal things or getting viruses, or they just couldn't download anything but run the training.
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up, Rob, because I remember the last company I worked for, we used to do a rental program for clients where they would actually get the same system that the clinic used in their home, because that company just have a simplified home training. And that was an issue for me, because every time those computers came back, I basically wiped the hard drive clean, and I would, it's what IT field, we call it cloning. I had a little device that we referred to as a toaster. You could put a good hard drive that you knew had everything perfect, along with the hard drive for the computer you just got back, and I would just wipe it and reset it. Because I found that out, it was, you'd go into the browser and look at the history, and yeah, you could see somebody was utilizing that computer for other things. I would get computers back that had video games loaded on them. So yeah, if you are going to be leasing them out, what Rob mentioned would be perfect. If you could just lock them out of everything but what they needed. But just understand, if you don't set it up that way, if you don't get a local IT person to help you with that, definitely kind of go through that computer when you get it back in the clinic and just kind of wipe browser histories, wipe everything out, make sure there's nothing on there that shouldn't be, just to make sure every client is, getting a good quality piece of equipment. All right, so once you get everything set up, you will need to get the client also a username and password. So that's going to be the same username and password that we set up for the client portal. So in their account page in newmindmaps.com, You're going to click on the client login tab on the left side. Under login information, there'll be an edit button. So you can click on that edit button and just simply copy and paste the system generated username and password, which the passwords are pretty crazy. So I would instruct the client to actually copy and paste instead of typing it, because one mistype of a character and they're not going to be able to log in. You can also just change the username and password if you want to something really simple. Just keep in mind, for passwords, our criteria is 8 characters long. There needs to be a capital letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and a special character like an exclamation or a question mark or a $sign, parentheses, any of those. A really easy default password is password123 exclamation point with a capital P. Now that I said that, you probably don't want to use that, but you could probably think of, a word. Maybe it's the clinic name, some numbers, an exclamation point, whatever it may be. If you just want to do generics, that's up to you. Once your client has all their information, now they're at home, they've got the equipment all plugged in, they've got the leads connected, they're ready to get going. So they're gonna open up their new Mind Home training software, they're gonna enter their user passname, and they're gonna log in. And we've really simplified this down for clients. We've got just one button generally per page that they're gonna click on. So it's always also gonna let them know, how many days they have training, what their expiration date is. I'm just gonna walk them through. So this client's gonna do a progress tracker, they're gonna get themselves connected, they're gonna select their feedback source, and then they're gonna start training. So they're just gonna click get started. Now with the progress tracker, as we saw earlier back here, I did have both the parent and the client progress tracker activated. So this is where they would select who's going to fill it out that day. So maybe this day it's going to be the client. We'll click track progress. Now, I always also recommend, whether your client is doing a progress tracker for home training or they're just doing it through the client portal, is I always instruct them that when they're filling out their symptoms and where they're at, I want them to think not of just that particular day. So think of a couple days, 2-3 days, and generally overall, how would they rank themselves? Because we all have things, we have busier days, easier days, crazier days sometimes. Maybe they had a bad day at work, bad day at school, something happened. I don't want them filling out the progress tracker based on simple little events that happened that day. I want an overall grand scheme picture. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the notes section. So they can type in anything they want here. This is just messages to you. You could just, something simple. I'm sleeping better. Whatever that is. And then all of those notes are going to be saved. They'll all be dated. So you can go into their progress tracker, scroll to the bottom of that page, and you can see all the notes there. So everyone can be on board, technicians, clinicians, to know where their client's at. And then again, there's just one single button here at the end. They're going to click save and continue. And now they've got a nice little image here of, getting themselves connected. So it's showing them, they're going to put on their references, they're going to get their ground on, they're going to get channel 1 and channel 2, or just a single channel, depending on what training plan you've set up. At that point, they just click continue. Again, one button. This is really the only page that has 2 buttons. We always force them into clicking check amplifier, you'll notice this start connection test is dulled out here. It's inactive at the moment. They must click check amplifier first. I don't have an amplifier hooked up, so mine's just going to come back in simulation mode. On a technical, like a troubleshooting side note here, if your client calls you and they say, hey, you know, I've got everything connected, but every time I click check amplifier, it just keeps coming back that it's in simulation mode. So it's potentially a couple things that have gone wrong. You know, so I always, just to double check, I always ask them, can you look at the back of the amplifier where the USB cable's plugged in and tell me, do you see a green light lit up? You know, because they might have a USB cable connected, but it's loose. They didn't push it in all the way. That green light needs to be on. That's indicating that it is receiving power from the computer. If the green light is turned on and it's still coming back in simulation mode, then in my experience, it's one of two issues. One of them is that your client has a laptop with Windows Pro on it. And in Windows Pro, there's an extra security feature that checks all the drivers for hardware. And if the operating system doesn't like that driver, it's not going to allow it to run. You know, so you can simply just come, if you like logged in with your client, you can just click on the search button, type in core, and when you see this core isolation, you either click here, you can click over here to open it. Now, if you type in core and nothing comes up, you know, so kind of if I go back here, let's just do that again. So if I type in core here and I don't see core isolation over on this side, then they don't have Windows Pro. You know, they've just got a regular Windows Home or Windows S. But if this pops up, they do have Windows Pro. So you're just going to click open and make sure this is turned off. When you turn it off, Windows is going to force you to do a restart on the computer to apply those changes. So just allow that to happen. When the computer boots back up, open the home training software, sign back in, get to this connected page. And at that point, they should see, you know, that the amplifier is connected. It'll say new mine, you know, to home there. Now, if you get through all of that and it still says that they're in simulation mode, then what's normally happening is there was a potential issue when they installed the software and the drivers didn't get completely loaded right. So you've got two choices there. Easy choice, pick up a phone, call us. We can do a three-way call with you and your client, just so you know that is a policy we have. It's not to make your lives harder. It's to make sure that when I'm communicating with your client, that you're on the phone to know that the client isn't asking anything about their care, because trust me, they do. They want to ask us a ton of questions on if you're doing things right or if you're doing things wrong. You know, should I be doing this? Is there something better you can suggest? I've had all the questions, you know, in the previous company, you know, and in that company, I started doing the same thing, just because I wanted to make sure that all of my clinics felt confident and safe, you know, that we weren't going to get involved in your client's training. That's, you know, their history, you know what's going on with them, you're their physician. I'm simply here to fix the problems for them. So you can definitely do that. If you want to try to fix it yourself, if you're kind of techie, you can open up File Explorer. You can go it's a long way in, but you can go to this PC, open up their C drive. You're going to go to Program Files x86. You are going to find the folder. In this case, it'd be NewMind Training Drivers. So your home trainer will have these two folders. This is the clinical software folder. So you're going to just open up this NewMind Training Drivers. There is this folder here, FTDI. We're going to open that. There's one file in it, and we're just going to double click on that and just keep following through, extract it, click next, accept it, click next, all just the basic. And pretty quick, you'll get to this screen telling you that the drivers are ready to use. You're going to click finish. Of course, do all that with the home training software closed. One of those two solutions will work 95% of the time. I should say probably 98. Now, we have had a few home trainers that their operating system was corrupted, and the home training software, when they would go to open it, it would stall out on the loading screen, and then the home training software would just close. They never even got to a login point. We searched and searched and searched to see if it was something to do with our software. Couldn't find any issues. So it was just an issue with their operating system. If you run into that, call me. There's a workaround. Microsoft, it was started with Windows 10. They created what's called the Media Creation Tool. You can simply just Google search that, type in Microsoft Media Creation Tool. We can actually do that so everyone can see it. I'll just do Media Creation Tool. And so you were going to see there's one for Windows 10. There's 10 and 11. So I can just do, probably the best thing to do is do Windows, let's say 11. And there we are. So if we click on that, this screen is going to come up, and all you're going to do is click download now. And once this is, the media creation tool is downloaded and you start running it, they're going to give you two options. One option is to just rebuild the operating system around all the existing software and files. That's where I would always start. There's nothing worse than completely wiping a computer back to brand new and then having to reload software, or worst case scenario, you forget to pull off all your documents and your pictures and videos and all the personal stuff you've got on that computer. I know a lot of people don't back their stuff up, so I always start with just trying to leave everything existing on the computer, but just have the media creation tool rebuild the operating system around it. Now, if that doesn't work, potentially what's going on is there's another piece of software that's conflicting with everything. Then at that point, you would have to do a complete wipe and reinstall. Make sure if that's the case, the client does have a portable hard drive that they can plug in. We want to pull off, all of the important stuff that they don't want to lose. And then you can do a complete wipe. And then once it's back to a fresh operating system with nothing on it, our software can be installed, should work fine, and then they can take time getting all their personal stuff back on. But just to bring that up from a troubleshooting standpoint of little issues that we see come through the tech line. Now, once they've checked their amplifier, they're going to need to click Start Connection Test. Now, I do recommend that you show your patients what a good connection should look like. Now, whether that's just taking a screenshot of a good connection test to say your trace line should look similar to this, explaining to them that the green dot should be green most of the time. You know, if they're seeing that there's more yellow here than green, then you know, either they don't have the sensors connected right, they're too tense, or they've got some electrical interference. And again, we talked about kind of on our knowledge base, just so everyone knows, there is one here for electrical interference issues. It's going to give you an explanation of what electrical interference is, as well as things to try. You know, so you've got this big list now that I've put together to help you through that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you can try that with your client if you can see that, you know, if you watch them put their sensors on through like a Zoom call, and you're saying, yeah, sensors look fine, you know, nothing wrong there, then this is probably the issue, is electrical interference. Maybe they're set up near the kitchen with a bunch of appliances, or they're near the breaker panel, or the computer they have isn't grounded right. You know, so this will explain everything. And again, I'll put this link up when I post these last two videos. I actually had a client at the end of my day yesterday come into our chat. There was a new home trainer, you know, obvious, you know, just the way the conversation went, they were obvious a little nervous and worried, you know, about what am I supposed to see? You know, how do I know I've got a good connection? You know, so, you know, that particular clinic, I don't know who the clinic was. I didn't ask. You know, I just kind of helped guide the client. You know, I gave them just the how-to video and the checklist and said, here's some tools to help you out. So I think spending time with your client, just making sure they understand what's good and not good, is just going to set them up for success. So they're not at home by themselves, you know, kind of in panic mode. Now, we'll notice that we now have a button that says select feedback. So this is because I allowed all four options. If you pigeonhole them into one form of feedback, then they're just going to have a start training button. But if you have given them options to go back and forth, they'll click the select feedback, and then they're going to choose here. You know, so if you gave them, let's say, audio fading and tones, then they can select one of those. So I'll just put screen fading, and now we'll start their session. And once this loads up, they're going to have the option here to set the level of screen fading. They'll also, if it's audio fading, they'll have just the maximum volume. We don't, like when you guys do audio fading in your clinic, you've got the option for minimum and maximum. You know, so we always recommend the minimums right around 10 to 15%. The maximum is the loudest they would like to hear that music or whatever audio they're listening to. With screen fading, I generally recommend somewhere between 80 and 90%. You know, we need to remember that we have to have enough feedback to force the brain into changing. Maybe not force, but to give it a reason to change. You know, if your client's got their screen fading and max down at 30%, once they start their session, there's not going to be enough change in the brightness of the screen to convince the brain to do something about it. Same goes with audio. You know, if we did give the client a minimum and they had, let's say this was audio and they had their maximum set in around here, and then their minimum was, you know, 10% less, it's not going to be enough of a reason for their brain, you know, to say, oh, I need to do something differently to try to hear this. You know, so always make sure, you know, that you guide them that if they're doing screen fading, that's 80 to 90%. If they're doing audio fading, they're just going to set the maximum at their comfort level. And if they don't know where that comfort level is, they can simply start the music. They can click on the volume at the bottom, and they can just start turning this up. And let's say it was right around 50% was the volume that is comfortable for them. Then they would set the maximum volume at that same. And that's how that works. Whatever the maximum audio is going to tie right into whatever the maximum volume of the computer is, same numbers. At that point, they're going to click start. The software will minimize into that upper left corner. They're going to have a timer there so they know when they're done. In that little head map there, those locations are interactive. They are going to change, you know, so when they create artifact, they'll see yellow up there. I'm going to instruct the client, don't get focused on that little box up there. You know, when you first start, you know, you can look up and just kind of make sure that you're seeing primarily green. And if you're seeing a lot of yellow, you know, kind of look back at that checklist that we talked about earlier. You know, and there is going to be the, let's just kind of drop that down for a minute. So during their session, you know, it's going to remind them to avoid slouching to sit up, to remain still and relaxed, arms and legs unfolded, you know, so little things for them to guide them through. And then this is going to run for whatever time you set. So in this case, it was set for 30 minutes. So the session will run for exactly 30 minutes and a few seconds, and then it'll stop. So there's no worry that the client's going to overtrain and do hour and a half sessions, you know, and tire their brain out more than it needed to be. Now on our side, for those of you that don't do home training and all of this is kind of new to you, there is a full linkability between this home training software and your clinical software. So we can see here, it's in the clinical software, it's telling us that we have a home trainer that's actively training. You'll notice at this point, though, there is nothing displayed. So you know it's not until we get to around the 3-minute mark, that's when the home training software is going to start sending data to the clinical software. So the home training software is going to first make sure that they have a good quality connection, that they're actually actively training. And we'll see that here in 20 seconds, and then we got to wrap this up. It's already a couple minutes after the hour. But you will be able to see your client's home training in real time on your clinical software. You can also,
every minute, doesn't it, Aaron? Every minute or so it'll update on the software screen, your screen, if you're watching a remote session.
Yep, that's correct. So we'll see now it's posting the first data at just after 3 minutes. And now from this point on, yes, Rob, you're correct. It'll be every minute. You'll get updated. This graph will change every minute. Now, just so everyone knows, if you do click on view plan details while they're training, you're going to get all their numbers. You're going to get performance, asymmetry, activation, but this is going to be static now. This screen will not update every minute. So you can just look at it and say, okay, EFG numbers are good, asymmetry, training efficiency. And then if you go back to all plans, you can let this run for maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. And then when you click on view plan details, you'll get the new updated information. There's also the ability to send a message. You know, maybe you notice a bunch of artifact. You can just send them a message. You have a choice of pausing it when you send it, or just simply allowing the session to run. So if it's something like just relax, we could send that message. And you can't see it right now because it's up on one of my other screens, but a box pops up and it says new message from clinician, relax, and they just click OK to get rid of it. So you can communicate with them while they're training. So that's all we've got. So yeah, if you do have any, we're after the hour, so I would just say if you have any questions, shoot me an email, erin@newmindtech.com, or give me a call, and I'll be happy to answer all those questions for you. And just kind of one last thing, this is the session results they would see, so we can see that as well. All right.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Good stuff. Very helpful information. And that's it, folks. We're going to go back to our regular schedule for the time being, but if there are other questions, like Aaron said, please feel free to email him directly. And we'll see you Monday night for a map review.
Thank you again, Aaron, for everything that you've done these last couple of weeks. Really helpful.
My pleasure.
So long,
All right.
folks.
Bye, everybody.